You keep staring at my note like it owes you something, she said, lips curving into a slow smile. Does it? Maybe, I said. Depends what it's offering. She had long blonde hair, a gold choker, and a Labrador who trusted me before she did. What happened that August in Austin started with two handwritten notes on a library bulletin board and ended with something neither of us saw coming. Hey, before we go further, how's your summer going? Are you traveling, visiting family, finally getting some rest? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to know. Because our hero's summer? It's about to get very interesting. Stay with us. The best part hasn't started yet. Let me tell you something about rock bottom. People always describe it like some dramatic moment. A single crash, a loud noise, the ground giving way all at once. But that's not how it happened for me. For me, it was quieter than that. It was a Tuesday morning in late July when I stood in my empty apartment in Austin, Texas, looking at a half-eaten bowl of cereal and realizing I hadn't spoken to another human being in 4 days. Not a cashier. Not a neighbor. Nobody. My name is Mark Callister. I'm 29 years old. For 2 years, I ran a small but genuinely good farmers market in South Austin, the kind of place where people actually knew the names of the folks who grew their food. We had regulars. We had a rhythm. I was proud of it in the way you're only proud of something you built with your own 2 hands. Then Claire left. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Claire. She was my fiancée. Then she wasn't. And the market, which I had started alone, long before she ever walked into my life, somehow became a casualty of her exit. Not legally, not officially, but emotionally. I couldn't keep it going. I tried for 2 months. I showed up. I set up the stalls. I smiled at the regulars. And then one Saturday morning, I drove to the lot, sat in my truck for 45 minutes, and drove home without getting out. That was the end of the market. By August, I was officially unemployed, running low on savings, and doing what any reasonable 29-year-old man does in that situation. I was walking other people's dogs for $20 a pop and pretending it was temporary, which is how I ended up at the Brentwood Branch Library on a Wednesday morning at 11 a.m., looking at a bulletin board covered in piano lesson flyers and lost cat notices, and one particular index card, handwritten in small, neat letters, that said, "Looking for a temporary dog-walking companion. Labrador, 4 years old, very friendly. I am not. Pay is fair. Ask for Zoe." I stood there reading it twice. Then I read the card I'd pinned up myself, directly below it, the day before. Dog walking services available. Experience, yes. References, no. Long story. Ask for Mark. I was still staring at both cards when I heard footsteps stop beside me. I turned. She was standing close enough that I caught the faint scent of something warm. Vanilla, maybe. Or something baked. She was about 5'4", light-skinned with long blonde hair swept into a thick French braid that ran down the side of her head and over her shoulder, the loose strands catching the slant of morning light coming through the library window like the whole thing had been arranged by someone who cared deeply about composition. A few soft pieces had escaped the braid and framed her face, the kind of effortless detail that is never actually effortless. She had freckles. Not many. Just a light scatter across her nose and the tops of her cheeks, the kind that show up in summer sun and make a person look like they spend time outdoors even when they don't. Around her throat, thin as a whisper, was a delicate gold choker, the kind of jewelry that doesn't announce itself, just catches your eye once and stays there. She was wearing a cream-colored sundress with small pink flowers printed across the fabric. Short puffed sleeves, a square neckline that framed her collarbone cleanly. The waist fitted in a way that made the whole thing look like it had been made specifically for her. The ruffled hem fell just above the knee. She looked completely out of place in a public library on a Wednesday morning and completely comfortable with that fact. She was looking at both cards. Then she looked at me. "That's you?" she said, nodding at the lower card. That's me, I said. That's you. She glanced at the upper card. Afraid so. There was a pause, the kind that should have been awkward but somehow wasn't. Beckett is very energetic, she said like a warning. So am I said. Then honestly, used to be. She studied me for a moment with calm, direct eyes, the kind of look that doesn't try to be anything, just sees. Whatever she found, she seemed to make a decision about it quickly. He's already been waiting 20 minutes, she said, turning toward the door. And he doesn't forgive easily. The dog? Yes, a beat. And me. She pushed through the library door into the August heat, and I, without fully deciding to, followed. I had no idea, walking out into that blinding Texas sun, that the next thing Zoe Mercer said to me would change the direction of everything that came after. But she hadn't said it yet. The heat hit us the second we stepped outside. That's the thing about Austin in August. It doesn't ease you in. It lands on you all at once, like a wall you walk through, thick and bright, and completely without apology. By 11 in the morning, the sidewalk was already radiating warmth through the soles of your shoes, and the air smelled like dry grass and something blooming that had no business blooming in this kind of heat. Zoe walked half a step ahead of me, which told me something. Not rudeness. More like habit. The habit of a person who's used to going first because waiting for someone else to lead has let her down before. She lived 4 blocks from the library, a ground floor unit in a pale yellow duplex with a small porch and a pot of basil by the front door that was doing better than either of us. I could hear Beckett before she even got the key in the lock, not barking, just a low, urgent whine. The sound of a creature who has been patient long enough and is done being diplomatic about it. She opened the door, and he came through it like a decision. Beckett was a big, honey-colored Labrador, with the kind of face that makes you feel immediately judged and immediately forgiven. He went straight for Zoe first, 2 full rotations around her legs, nose pressed to her hand, and then he turned to me and went completely still. 4 years old, she'd said. Old enough to know that strangers are a category, and that categories require evaluation. He stepped forward and pressed his nose into my palm. Then he looked up at me with those amber eyes like he was confirming something he'd already suspected. He likes you, Zoe said, sounding mildly surprised, like Beckett's opinion mattered and didn't come cheap. I have an honest face, I said. He doesn't care about faces. She clipped the leash to his collar and handed it to me in one clean motion, a small test disguised as practicality. He cares about energy. We headed toward the trail that ran along Shoal Creek, Beckett threading between us like he was the one managing the situation. The shade there was real shade. Cedar elms and live oaks that had been doing this long enough to mean it. The temperature dropped 4 degrees the moment we stepped under the canopy, and I heard Zoe exhale in a way that sounded less like relief and more like the first honest breath she'd taken all day. We walked for a while without talking. That surprised me. Most people fill silence like it's a problem to be solved. Zoe let it sit there like it was fine, like she wasn't performing anything. It was Beckett who broke it, in his way, lunging suddenly toward a squirrel with such full-body commitment that I had to brace hard on the leash, and the leash jerked, and somehow, in the physics of that moment, Zoe's hand came up to steady my arm, and then dropped away just as quickly. Sorry, she said. He's fast. He's optimistic, she said. He genuinely believes every single time that this will be the day he catches one. That's either inspiring or heartbreaking. She considered it. Most things are both. I looked at her sideways. She was watching Beckett with a small, private smile, the kind that doesn't know it's being worn. The gold choker caught the light through the leaves, and a loose strand of her braid had fallen forward across her cheek, and she didn't push it away. So, I said, because the silence had become the comfortable kind, which is actually the dangerous kind. Online cooking school. She glanced at me. You read the note carefully. I read both notes carefully. Professional habit. You're a professional note reader. Recovering farmer's market operator? I said. We pivot. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but the territory just before one. My sister and I built it together, she said after a moment. 18 months ago. It was actually working. Like, genuinely working. Not just breaking even, but growing. She paused. She met someone, moved to Portland, and on her way out, she sold her half of the platform to someone I've never met. Didn't tell me until the paperwork was already signed. The way she said it was measured. Too measured. The kind of calm that comes from having processed the anger already, down to its bones, and deciding that expressing it to a stranger on a first dog walk was not the move. How long do you have? I asked. She looked at me sharply. To do what? To figure it out, before the new co-owner makes a move. The sharpness softened into something closer to tired. 30 days. He wants a buyout offer by September 10th, or he's rebranding the whole platform under a different name. She said the number, the way people say the thing they've been trying not to think about. I don't have the capital for a buyout. Not even close. Beckett had stopped at the creek's edge and was staring into the water with intense philosophical focus. What about you? She asked. Farmer's market. What happened? I kept my eyes on the dog. My fiancé and I ran it together. She left. I tried to keep it going without her. I picked up a small stone and turned it over in my fingers. Turns out I was running on her energy more than I realized. Or maybe I just didn't want to be there anymore without the reason I built it. I set the stone down rather than throw it. I'm currently being sued by her, actually. She's claiming the market was a joint asset. Zoe turned to look at me fully. Was it? No. I started it 8 months before I met her. I have documentation. I finally looked back at her. But documentation doesn't pay a lawyer. She held my gaze for a moment, not with pity, which I would have hated, but with the recognition of someone looking at a version of her own situation from a slightly different angle. We're a mess, she said. We're August in Texas, I said. Hot, complicated, and not entirely sure when the rain's coming. This time, she did smile. It arrived slowly and rearranged everything. Beckett chose that exact moment to shake himself dry, despite not having gone anywhere near the water, and managed to spray both of us with what I can only assume was enthusiasm. Zoe laughed, a real one, sudden and unguarded, the kind that a person can't manufacture. She pressed her hand briefly to my forearm to steady herself, and the touch lasted maybe 2 seconds. It was the kind of 2 seconds you remember. We turned back toward the duplex, Beckett walking between us with the satisfied air of someone who has accomplished exactly what he set out to do. I didn't know yet what he'd started, but I think he did. It became a routine before either of us named it as one. Every morning at 8, I showed up at the pale yellow duplex. Every morning, Beckett was already at the door. Not whining this time, just present, like a colleague who arrives early and doesn't make a thing of it. Zoe would hand me the leash, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with a look that said the coffee was coming and to give her 30 seconds. I always gave her the 30 seconds. By the 4th day, she was walking with us. She never announced it. She just appeared beside me on the porch one morning with her own coffee in hand, her long blonde hair loosely braided over one shoulder, the early light catching the gold threads in it before the Texas sun had fully committed to the day. She was wearing a simple white linen shirt, tucked into high-waisted olive shorts. Clean, unhurried, like someone who'd made peace with the morning, even if she hadn't made peace with everything else. The gold choker sat at her throat, as always, catching light the way certain quiet things do. Beckett walks better with 2 people, she said, as explanation. He does, I agreed, though we both knew that wasn't the reason. We walked, we talked. Not about the lawsuit, not about the platform, not at first. We talked about smaller things. The best taco truck on South Congress. Whether Austin had changed too much or just enough. The particular cruelty of August humidity. She had opinions about all of it, delivered in this calm, precise way, like someone who'd thought things through before speaking, which, in my experience, is rarer than it should be. But the other things crept in eventually. They always do when two people stop performing okayness for each other. On the 6th day, she told me about her first cooking class upload, how she and her sister had filmed it in their apartment kitchen on a Tuesday night with a $20 ring light and a phone propped against a stack of cookbooks, how 63 people watched it live, how she'd cried afterward, not because of the numbers, but because something she'd built had found people who wanted it. On the 7th day, I told her about the morning I'd driven to the market and sat in my truck for 45 minutes. I'd never told anyone that story before, not even my brother. She didn't say anything when I finished. She just nodded once, slowly, like she was filing it somewhere careful. That evening, she invited me to stay for dinner. Her kitchen was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who taught people to cook, organized but lived in, herbs growing in small pots along the windowsill, a knife block that had clearly been selected with intent. She made pasta from scratch, while I sat at the counter and tried to be useful by slicing tomatoes, which she watched with the patient expression of someone deciding whether to correct me. "Your knife angle is wrong," she said finally. "I ran a farmer's market. I sold tomatoes. I didn't slice them. Different skill set. Entirely." She leaned across the counter and adjusted my hand, fingers repositioned, grip corrected, and didn't move away immediately. Close enough that I could see the faint scatter of freckles across her nose, the way the kitchen light picked up the loose strands around her face that had escaped the braid. She smelled like olive oil and something floral and warm that I was starting to think was just her. She moved back to the stove without comment. We ate on the porch because the kitchen held the heat of cooking, and the evening outside had finally, reluctantly, dropped to something bearable. Beckett lay between our chairs, like a rug that breathed. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing guitar badly and happily. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Your market, the farmers you worked with. Do you still have those relationships?" I set my fork down. "Most of them." "Yeah." "Why?" She was quiet for a moment, turning her wine glass slowly in her hands. The gold choker caught the porch light. She was looking out at the street, not at me, and I recognized the look. It was the look of someone standing at the edge of an idea they're not sure they're allowed to say out loud yet. "I keep thinking," she said carefully, "about what the platform is missing. What it's always been missing." A pause. "It teaches people to cook, but it doesn't connect them to where food actually comes from. It's all technique, no story, no faces behind the ingredients." I was very still. "And I keep thinking," she continued, still not looking at me, "that if someone had real relationships with local farmers, people who could actually talk about their land, their seasons, their product, and you paired that with a live stream format, with real cooking, real conversation." She stopped, set the glass down. "It's probably a terrible idea." "It's not a terrible idea," I said. She finally looked at me. "I was going to say the same thing to you," I said. "Last Tuesday. I didn't." "Why not?" I held her gaze. "Same reason you almost didn't say it just now." She understood. The last time either of us had trusted a partner with something we'd built, it had cost us. Not just money. Not just a business. The version of ourselves that believed building something together was safe. Neither of us said that part. We didn't need to. What we did do was sit on that porch for another 2 hours, talking about what it could look like. The format, the farmers, the audience, the name. Beckett snored between us. The bad guitarist down the street got marginally better. At some point, she went inside to get her laptop and came back with subscriber data from her platform. Real numbers, real retention rates. I pulled up contacts on my phone. farmers, suppliers, people who'd shaken my hand across a market table and meant it. It was almost midnight when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Something changed in her face. A door closing behind her eyes. "I have to take this," she said quietly. She stepped inside. I could hear her voice through the screen door. Low, controlled, and then not controlled. One sharp sentence I couldn't make out. Then silence. She came back out 2 minutes later. The laptop was still open between us, full of everything we'd just imagined together. She sat down, picked up her wine glass, put it back down without drinking. "That was my lawyer," she said. "The new co-owner isn't waiting until September 10th anymore." Her voice was steady in the way that takes effort. "He filed a motion this afternoon to freeze the platform's assets pending valuation. As of tomorrow morning, I can't touch anything. No uploads, no classes, no revenue." She looked at me. 30 days just became 24 hours. The guitar down the street had stopped. Beckett lifted his head, looked at Zoe, and put it back down on her foot. I didn't say everything is going to be fine. I knew better than that. "Okay," I said instead. "Then we start tonight." We worked until 3 in the morning. Not romantically, practically. Zoe at one end of the porch table with her laptop, me at the other with my phone and a legal pad I'd found in her kitchen drawer. Beckett had given up on us around midnight and moved inside to his bed, which felt like a reasonable editorial comment on the situation. She pulled every document she had on the platform: incorporation papers, original investment records, email threads with her sister going back 18 months. I went through my contacts methodically, separating the farmers I knew would answer a call from the ones who'd gone quiet after the market closed. We made 2 lists. Then we made a third, things we didn't have yet that we needed. Around 1 a.m., she made coffee, strong enough that I felt it before I finished the cup. Around 2, she found something. "Mark." Her voice had changed, sharper, focused. "Look at this." She turned the laptop toward me. It was an email chain between her sister and the third-party buyer, dated 6 weeks before the sale was finalized, before her sister had said a single word to Zoe about leaving the business. "She was negotiating while we were still building," Zoe said. Quiet, precise. The way people speak when the anger is so large it's become architectural. "Does your lawyer have this?" I sent everything, but I don't think he saw this thread. It was buried in a folder I forgot I'd archived. She was already forwarding it. "If the negotiations started before she formally notified me of her intent to exit, there may be a breach of fiduciary duty. We had an operating agreement. She had obligations." I looked at her. Somewhere in the last 2 weeks, the woman who'd handed me a dog leash like a small, careful test had become someone sitting at a porch table at 1 in the morning, reading corporate email chains with the focus of a person who has decided that losing is no longer an acceptable option. It was honestly one of the most attractive things I'd ever seen. I didn't say that. "Send it," I said. "Tonight. Don't wait until morning." She sent it. We kept working. The next 9 days were not a montage. They were phone calls that went to voicemail and emails that came back with automatic replies. They were a meeting at the UT Austin Free Legal Clinic, where a third-year law student named Patricia reviewed Zoe's case with the calm efficiency of someone twice her age and said, after 20 minutes, "This is actually stronger than you think." They were 2 farmers, Ramon from Bastrop and old Gene Whitfield from Lockhart, who said yes before I finished asking, because they remembered what the market had meant and were looking for something new to believe in. They were also, somewhere in the middle of all of it, a Tuesday afternoon when Zoe and I had our first real fight. It started over something small, the platform name. I'd suggested something clean and direct. She wanted something warmer. I pushed back. She pushed harder. And then somehow, it wasn't about the name anymore. It was about trust, about whether either of us was actually capable of doing this again, building something with another person and not watching it collapse. And the words got sharper than either of us intended. She said, I don't know if I can trust your instincts on branding when you couldn't even keep a market running. The sentence landed between us like something dropped from a height. I stood up from the porch table, walked to the railing, looked at the street for a long moment. "That was unfair," she said behind me. Her voice had already changed. "It was," I said. "And you know it." "I know it." A pause. "I'm sorry, Mark." I turned around. She was sitting with her hands flat on the table, looking at me directly. No deflection, no justification. Just the apology, clean and complete. Something about that undid me more than the words had. "I'm scared too," I said, in case that wasn't obvious. "It wasn't," she said. "You're annoyingly calm." "Performance," I said. "I practiced." She almost smiled. Then she did. Then I did. We didn't fix everything in that moment, but we got through it, which is different and more important. It was the following Saturday when Beckett made his move. We were on the Shoal Creek Trail, late afternoon, the sun finally dropping towards something reasonable. Zoe was wearing a pale blue sundress, her long blonde braid loose and slightly undone from the walk, gold choker catching the slanted light between the trees. She was mid-sentence, something about content calendars, when Beckett simply decided that the leash was a suggestion. He went left. Hard left. Off the trail, through a gap in the cedar hedge, down a side street neither of us had walked before. By the time we caught up to him, slightly out of breath and considerably less dignified than we'd started, he was sitting in the middle of an open lot in the shadow of what used to be, based on the faded lettering above the entrance, the 6th Street Covered Market. It was a wide, low building with a corrugated iron roof and tall, open sides, the kind of structure that had been beautiful once and was waiting, without urgency, to be beautiful again. The lot around it was clear. A hand-lettered sign, zip-tied to the gate, read, "For lease, inquire within." Beckett was sitting directly in front of the sign, looking at us. "He planned this," I said. "He's a Labrador," Zoe said. "He saw a squirrel and got lucky." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." She looked at the building for a long moment. The late sun came through the open sides and lit the interior in long gold bars across the concrete floor. I watched her take it in. The space, the scale, the particular silence of a place that used to hold something and was ready to again. "The farmers could set up here," I said carefully. "Live. Real product, real people. We film the classes on site instead of a studio. The audience gets both, the market and the kitchen." She didn't answer immediately. She walked to the gate, wrapped her fingers around the chain link, and looked through it, the way you look at something you're already imagining differently. "It would change the whole model," she said. "Yes." "It would be harder." "Yes." "It would be better." "Yes." She turned to look at me. Her hair had come half out of the braid in the chase, loose blonde strands across her shoulders, and she hadn't fixed it, and she looked like someone who was done performing composure and had decided that reel was better. "Call the number on the sign," she said. I already had my phone out. Beckett lay down in the shade with the expression of a dog who has done his part and expects to be acknowledged for it. We acknowledged him. The call to the number on the sign took 40 seconds. The landlord, a retired contractor named Dale, who answered on the second ring like he'd been expecting us, said the space had been empty for 14 months, and he was, quote, "tired of looking at it do nothing." We scheduled a walk-through for Monday. Beckett was not invited but came anyway, sitting outside the gate with the patient authority of someone who feels their contribution has already been established. Dale shook my hand, looked at Zoe, looked at the space, and said, "You two remind me of my wife and me in 1987. We had no money and a terrible idea, and it worked out fine." Zoe looked at me sideways. I looked at the ceiling. We signed the lease 3 days later. The legal victory came first, and it came quietly. The way good news often does, almost apologetically, as if it knows it's arriving late. Patricia, the third-year law student from the UT Legal Clinic, who had reviewed Zoe's case with that particular calm of someone born to untangle other people's messes, called on a Thursday morning in the third week of August. Zoe was at my place. We'd been working there that morning, documents spread across the kitchen table, and she put the call on speaker without hesitating, which told me something about how far we'd come since a bulletin board and a dog leash. The email chain Zoe had found, the one buried in the archived folder, the one that proved her sister had been negotiating secretly 6 weeks before formally announcing her exit, had done exactly what we'd hoped. The operating agreement they'd signed when launching the platform included a right of first refusal clause. Her sister had been legally obligated to offer Zoe the chance to buy her share before selling to a third party. She hadn't. The motion to freeze the platform's assets was withdrawn. The sale itself was being challenged. "You're not out of the woods entirely," Patricia said through the phone, "but you have ground to stand on. Real ground." Zoe pressed her hand flat against the kitchen table and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then she opened them, picked up her coffee, and said, "Okay, what's next?" That was Zoe Mercer. She didn't celebrate until the work was done. It was infuriating. It was one of my favorite things about her. My own situation resolved itself 2 weeks later, with considerably less drama. The documentation proving I'd established the market 8 months before Claire entered the picture was exactly as clean as I'd believed it to be. Her attorney, apparently reviewing the same documents, recommended she withdraw the suit. She did. I found out via email. 3 sentences. No subject line. I sat with it for about 10 minutes, then took Beckett for a walk, alone, just the two of us. And somewhere along the creek trail, I realized I hadn't thought about Claire in 6 days. Not once. I'd been too busy building something to spend time mourning something that was already finished. That felt like its own kind of answer. The platform launched on October 14th. We called it Root and Table. Zoe's instinct, ultimately, and she was right, which I told her directly and without qualification, because I'd learned that being right about names doesn't require being gracious about it. But it's better when you are. The first live session was filmed at the 6th Street Covered Market on a Saturday morning. Ramon from Bastrop behind a table of late-season tomatoes and dried chilies. Zoe at a portable kitchen setup we'd built along the east wall. Sunlight coming through the open sides of the building in the long gold bars we'd first seen that afternoon. Beckett made his escape. 412 people watched live. The chat moved faster than either of us could read. It wasn't perfect. The audio cut out twice. Ramon mispronounced heirloom as something that rhymed with helicopter and didn't care even slightly. Zoe burned the first batch of roasted chilies and laughed about it on camera in a way that the audience, based on the comment section, found deeply charming. It was honest. It was real. It was exactly what we'd imagined on that porch at midnight 3 months earlier. After the session ended and the cameras were off and Ramon had packed his truck and driven back to Bastrop, Zoe and I sat on the edge of the market's low wooden stage with our feet hanging off, and Beckett between us, eating a cold tamale someone had left on the table and looking thoroughly satisfied with all outcomes. "We did that," she said. "We did that," I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder. I put my arm around her. It was the first time either of us had done anything that simple and that deliberate, and we both knew it, and neither of us made it complicated. Thanksgiving arrived the way it always does. Faster than expected and louder than you planned for. Zoe's mother, Carol Mercer, flew in from Atlanta on the Wednesday before, and was in Zoe's kitchen reorganizing the spice rack within 20 minutes of arrival. She was 61, sharp-eyed, and had the particular energy of a woman who has raised a daughter alone and developed strong opinions about everything as a result. She met me at the kitchen doorway, looked me over once, not unkindly, but completely. "You're the one who walks the dog," she said. "That, and a little more," I said. She considered this, looked at Beckett, who was sitting beside me with his best responsible companion posture, looked back at me. "Good," she said. Then she handed me a sweet potato and told me to peel it, which I understood to be acceptance. Dinner was loud and warm and ran 2 hours longer than anyone planned. Carol told a story about Zoe's first attempt at Thanksgiving dinner at age 19 that made Zoe cover her face with both hands. I told the story about the farmer's market's first Saturday. 30 people, 2 vendors, and a handwritten sign I'd spelled wrong and didn't notice until noon. Carol laughed in the specific way that means she's deciding she likes you. After dinner, after Carol had gone to bed and the dishes were done and Beckett was asleep in his corner, Zoe and I walked back to the 6th Street Market. We did that sometimes in the evenings, just walked over, let ourselves in with our key, stood in the quiet of it. The space looked different at night, smaller, warmer. The street light coming through the open sides in pale columns across the concrete floor. I stopped in the middle of it. "Zoe." She turned. I didn't have a ring. I hadn't planned this. Or maybe I had. The way you plan things without admitting it to yourself. The way the idea exists fully formed before you acknowledge it consciously. "I'm not going to tell you I have everything figured out," I said. "I don't. The platform is 3 weeks old. My savings account is optimistic at best. I still talk to my lawyer more than I'd like." She was watching me with those calm, direct eyes. "But I know that every good thing that has happened to me since the end of July has happened because I followed a Labrador out of a library." I paused. "And because of you, specifically you." The gold choker caught the pale streetlight. Her long blonde hair was down tonight, fully loose, the way I'd rarely seen it, falling past her shoulders in soft waves that caught every available light in the room like they were made for it. "Do you want to try again?" I asked. "Not the platform, not the market, us, together, all of it." She looked at me for a long moment. "Do you have references?" she said. "No," I said. "Long story." She smiled, that slow, full smile that rearranges everything, and closed the distance between us, and I knew before she said a word what the answer was. She said it anyway. "I was 29 years old when I lost everything I thought mattered. And I want to tell you, if you're listening to this and you've been there, if you know what it feels like to sit in a parking lot and not be able to get out of the car, it doesn't stay like that. It doesn't have to. I wasn't looking for a second chance. I was looking for $20 and something to do with my hands. But life put a bulletin board in front of me, and a handwritten note, and a 4-year-old Labrador who turned out to be smarter than both of us combined. Beckett still walks with us every morning. There are just 3 of us now, and 1 more coming in the spring. We named the platform Root and Table. Look us up, and if you ever see a note on a library bulletin board, read it carefully. It might be for you. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.